What's up, LA? What is up? Good morning. Welcome to LAFB Live. Hopefully, you got your cup of Joe. I know Steven's been up even earlier. I've been up since 6 as well. So, my man, what's going on? Good morning. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday, man. Yeah, I don't sleep in like ever. Working in education has just kind of molded my body to a point where even on the weekends, even in the summer, I'm up at 6, and that's the life. So, but I'm doing well, man. Good Saturday. I was saying this the other day, but I work in education for those who don't know. And here in Fresno, we're 4 weeks away from summer break. So the end is near. Cannot wait to put this year from hell behind us. So it's a long road, but can't wait for summer break.
Oh, man. Have you been? I know you're not like necessarily a teacher, you're more admin, but have you been actually in person the whole year, or have you been remote half, in person half?
Um, I was able to work partially from home up until after Christmas break. And then after Christmas break, they were like, okay, everybody's back on campus. And the students were in a hybrid setting. So we did essentially, Monday and Friday was virtual. The other days, the students kind of been matched when they came in person. So it's been a crazy year. Everybody's back on campus for 4 days a week now. So Mondays are virtual, but then Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays are all in person for everybody now. So
Everybody, okay.
kind of back to normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know my cousin's a teacher in, I think it's technically San Bernardino County. And then I know teachers here in LA County. And it's like where they do your choice. So he's a biology teacher, an AP bio and chem teacher. And so he's like, yeah, dude, it's like the weirdest thing. I'll literally be in class. There's 5 students sitting there, and then I have 20 kids on Zoom. So I'm literally talking to a computer, but there's also kids. He's like, it's the weirdest thing. So whatever. We're almost through.
Our school district here allowed people to stay online if they could like prove that they had, they were high risk for COVID, or if they were taking care of somebody that was high risk for COVID. So on our campus, I work at the middle school, and so there's 5-6 teachers that are still 100% online, and then everybody else is back to normal 100% capacity in classrooms and everything. So it gets a little crazy. They have to be like spread out, and not every single classroom has like the space to spread out 30 kids, and so it's like, well, we're not even like socially distancing anymore. Like, what is happening?
It's it's interesting times. All the rules that were in place are now, I think it's just, it's been what, 13, 14, 15 months.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's been a mess. COVID has really just like, it's run rampant through a lot of things, right? But it's really, really messed up the educational world and thrown everything for a loop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And hopefully it'll be one of those teachable moments, right? Using the education, we'll learn and make things better. Our education needed some work anyway. So
that is true.
But anyway, back to sleep though. I got to say this real quick before we get going here. Welcome guys, everyone joining in. We will talk Rams and Chargers, promise. My daughter, for the second time in her life, slept through the night last night. And so I'm energized. She woke up at 6, but hey, I put her down at 8, did not wake up once until 6 a.m. It's a glorious
feeling. Mia. Let's go.
Yeah, a glorious feeling. Those are parents out there that know. So a year, and she's 13 months right now. 13 months of straight waking up every 3 hours. And all of a sudden we had a night of sleep. It was amazing.
A glorious night of sleeping from start to finish. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so I feel good. Today, man, I'm excited. We're going to talk a little bit of day 3 draft picks. I know everyone's probably sick of the draft, so we won't spend a ton of time on it, but we'll talk day 3 for the Rams and Chargers, which was primarily the Rams draft, and the Chargers had a lot of picks too. So, a lot of picks. We're going to do a little look at Tom Telesco versus Les Snead, who's had the better offseason thus far. And then take a look at the schedule. Schedule's released on Wednesday, coming out. Stoked for it. So maybe we'll talk who should be the matchups we see first, any primetime games. So just have some fun with it. Give a quick shout out. Garrison Brothers Whiskey and Brewery X in Anaheim are sponsors of the LAFB network. If you're here in SoCal, got to make sure to check out Brewery X. It's right in Anaheim off La Palma near Angel Stadium. Garrison Brothers, you can head right online. You can order. They're at Total Wine. They're at Bevmo, or just head to lafbnetwork.com, and we got the link for you right there. All right. Chargers, Rams. Who do you want to start with? Is there a pick? I mean, we're just kind of going off the cuff here. Is there a pick you want to get into? Is there couple guys you want to talk about? Is there anything just on your mind you want to unload right now?
Well, we were kind of talking beforehand about, the Rams not drafting an offensive lineman, the Chargers waiting until round 7 to take a safety. So maybe we could dive into kind of like how we all perceive needs versus how teams perceive their own needs kind of conversation.
I like that. Real quick before we do that, I gotta show this from Ross, because this is a tough question in my house. Raising me as a Charger Rams fan. So those that don't watch my show, the LA Football Podcast, I'm actually a Broncos fan. I know that's blasphemy. People are probably going to jump down my throat right now. So probably raising her as a Bronco fan, but I don't know. It's her choice. We're in LA. I'll let her choose what she wants.
There you go. That's the best way to do things, man, especially in a place where you're not like physically there, because, so growing up in Utah, we don't have a team, right? And so a lot of people in Utah either choose the Broncos because that's the local broadcast team, or they choose, a popular team like the Cowboys, Steelers, kind of situation. So my dad actually growing up was a Cowboys fan, because that was just that was the popular team that he could watch. And that all changed once we went and saw the Chargers in person when I was a kid, and then everybody kind of hopped on the Chargers bandwagon.
Yeah.
My brother he lived in Philadelphia for a while, so he's an Eagles fan. So you just gotta let people make their own decisions once they get older, and then hopefully they make the right decision and become Chargers fans.
Yeah, we'll see. So as long as she's a football fan, that's all I hope. So we can watch games together. So, but yeah, I like what you're saying. So perceived notion of what teams should do, because everyone has their opinion. GMs rarely listen to them, especially to us on Twitter. Yeah. We'll start with you with the Chargers. Who was I guess some perceived needs that maybe they did not address, or they did? Just I guess we'll just start with you with the Chargers on that.
Well, I think in terms of the Chargers need, I think the biggest surprise is that they went receiver and tight end early, because we kind of talked about this. I figured that they would add some players to those rooms. But, I figured that they would address edge rusher earlier than they did. I figured that they would address safety way earlier than they did. And we've kind of had this conversation specifically about the safety room because, it's going to be very interesting to see how Staley translates things from the Rams to the Chargers. Obviously, the roster construction was very, very different. But you look at who the Rams had. You had Terrell Burgess, you had John Johnson, you had Jordan Fuller. Their safety room was very, very good. Obviously, they had to develop those players, and Burgess ended up getting hurt. But, they had a lot of bodies there, too, that they could rotate in. I think they had like 5 or 6 safeties on the roster. And so I kind of looked at the way that they would use their safeties and figured that they would want, like 3 high-quality safety prospects to play on the field at once. And so I kind of looked at, the way that the safety board was falling. And each time, I'm writing LAFB articles for previewing the next day. And every single time I'm like, man, there's some really good safeties on the board. Like they could take advantage of these safeties that are falling. And then they end up waiting till the 7th round to take a safety. And so it's just interesting because Brandon Staley clearly saw something. They trusted, their evaluation process. And clearly they see something in Mark Webb because he's going to play. And clearly they like Alohi Gilman more than the rest of us think they should. So it's just interesting to see, like, we all look at, obviously none of us know everything, right? But we can look at patterns and look at past history and kind of try to follow the breadcrumbs. And so to me, the breadcrumbs were leading me to think that safety was going to be a bigger need than it actually ended up being.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you there. But I think, and I've talked about this a bunch, and I don't know if you agree or not, but I think when they were able to get Asante Samuel Jr. in the 2nd round, that gave them the flexibility of saying, because I've said many times, Brandon Staley uses the secondary as the secondary. He doesn't necessarily pigeonhole corner and safety, uses them very coversely. We saw it with the Rams a lot last year, different players in that star position, different players in that nickel position. Obviously they had their sets, but they moved around a ton. So I think when they got Asante Samuel, that gave them a lot of wiggle room to say, now we're not forced to get a safety. I still think I agree with you. There were some really good safeties on the board.
Yeah.
When they took a tight end, when they took a receiver, they could have absolutely gotten, but obviously, they felt good about Gilman. They felt good about who they have. And then, maybe this is dangerous, but obviously they're putting a lot of eggs in the basket that Derwin stays healthy. And that's probably the biggest concern. But because when you look at the Rams, before the draft, they had Eric Weddle retire. So their safeties were basically, they had John Johnson, they had Taylor Rapp, who was just coming off his rookie year, who played better in the box, didn't play great deep, even though Staley wants to do a too high safety set. And they had Nick Scott, who was a special team guy, 7th round pick from years prior. That was their room. They went, 2 safeties in the draft. Jordan Fuller getting him in the 6th. No one really knew about him. He was kind of a Ojai Gilman pick. They were taking the same round, I believe. So he was coming in as like maybe a guy develop. He'll be a special teamer. Blows everyone out of the water in training camp, ends up starting. So maybe I'm just drinking too much of the Kool-Aid or just really playing off of what the Rams did last year. But I think Mark Webb is going to be, that Jordan Fuller type player. He's very cerebral, very smart, not super, super athletically gifted, but I think he's going to do what Staley wants. So I think that's why they felt confident about that. But yeah, I mean, they're putting a lot of faith that Derwin stays healthy, because if not, then that's a thin room. But I think
it is a thin room. And that's really what worries me. Like, I know the likelihood is that Derwin James stays healthy, but it's also likely that other people are injured. And so to me, like, the worry becomes if Nasir Adderley gets hurt, then you have to play Derwin James as kind of that deep safety, because Alohi Gilman, Mark Webb, Ben DeLuca, who they, brought in as an undrafted free agent, all of them are very limited athletically. And you've got to be able to have players with range and athleticism deep. And they've only got James and Nasir Adderley who can kind of fill that role. And so if Adderley's goes down, then are you moving Derwin James deep? And to me, that's kind of a waste of his talent. And so it feels like, to me, they're playing with fire a little bit, honestly, because they've got all these question marks around this room. Obviously, what you have in Derwin James, but he hasn't been healthy. Nasir Adderley had a really, really down season. And to me, the biggest issue with Nasir Adderley was that he just didn't really trust his instincts. And it just felt like he was, half a second, 1 second late in every instance, whether it be as a tackler, whether it be as a playing deep and playing the ball. Alohi Gilman played and started in 2 games, and really, like, how much do you value that last game against the Chiefs? And then you have Mark Webb, who's a 7th round pick. So to me, it kind of feels like a very similar conversation to what we were all talking about last year with the offensive line, where they didn't add enough bodies. And so that position group is the one that worries me the most. And I think they've got to add somebody else, via free agency, or bring in another undrafted free agent or something, because the depth is just, it concerns me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. And a guy that I tweeted out a bunch was Will Park. So I thought would have fit great, had relationship with Staley, very versatile, big body. And then he goes and signs with the freaking Chiefs. So how are the Chiefs getting all these guys that we want? And how are they still signing people? What do they have, like 100 people on their roster? I feel like every signing for the Chiefs. I'm like, you guys they have on the roster?
Well, they're paying Joe Thuney like $400,000 this year because of the way that they structured the contract. So
yeah, and Mahomes is making $7 million or whatever.
Yeah, and Orlando Brown's he's still on his rookie deal. So it sucks because they're very smart, but
whoever their cap guru is, their Tony Pastors, the Rams cap guru, whoever that guy is, that guy needs a raise, because he 100%. Is manipulating the cap quite well. I think it'll 100%. Eventually come back to bite them. I'm still going to stand by that. In a year or two, eventually it's going to hit them. I think in 2 years, Mahomes' cap hit is like 45 million or something. So eventually,
well, and things will get easier for them too once Frank Clark's contract is off, because his cap hit, I think, is like $19 million this year, and he's also not very good. But once that contract comes off the board for them, or off the books, I think that'll make it easier. So let's talk about the Rams offensive line situation, because we kind of talked about, everybody assumed that they would take a center, or at least somebody who could like compete at guard, and they didn't draft any. So what do you make of the Rams offensive line situation?
Well, it's interesting, and we were talking a little bit before we jumped on that at every pick on Rams Twitter that was not an offensive lineman, there was like an implosion of just vitriol and confusion, and the world is ending. And every pick is like, okay, now this is gonna be the pick. You see these guys fall, and you're like, okay, good, we can get this guy, Yeah. Nope, they take a receiver. Oh, they take another receiver. No, they take an inside defensive lineman. And so, but I think it just before the draft, Sean McVay and Les Snead said explicitly they felt good about the guys they had in the room when talking specifically about the offensive line. Now, at the time, we kind of all took that as, coaches speak and just, saying they're not, showing their hand, but then obviously they do feel good about it. So, whether they roll with Brian Allen, who they drafted 2 or 3 years ago out of Michigan State, who's just been injured. I know he didn't look very good in the spotted work he had in 2019. But they might roll with him. Coleman Shelton, the guy that they feel good about, they signed out of Washington, who was a really good Pac-12 player, but just didn't get drafted. So, has that stigma of a guy that's, coming off the street kind of thing. But they feel good about him, where they slide over, Austin Corbett again, and they use David Edwards and Bobby Evans, former tackles, both inside. So I'm not as down on it as other people, considering they were rated the 3rd overall line by PFF last year. And just by losing Austin Blythe, I don't think all of a sudden they're going to be, the 32nd offensive line by losing a center who was a average center, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was interesting. I was still surprised. I believe in them. And I like I said, I'm not as down as the line, but I was still surprised they didn't at least add someone to compete. But I guess it just shows they feel really good about either Brian Allen or Coleman Shelton. Or we had Andrew Whitworth on the show a few weeks ago. He said he'd be willing to play center if needed. So maybe they're going with that.
Well, I've got to say they're one of the teams that I'm most upset about for not drafting Creed Humphrey, because it was right there, man. It was right there in your lap. Like, you just take Creed and you keep your elite offensive line. Then again, Creed did end up falling way further than I thought. So I was surprised for sure that it was a very similar conversation to the Chargers in the safety position, because at every term it was like, okay, here's this player, and then it was like, all right, there's an edge rusher. All right, there's a linebacker from Iowa. And similar conversation with the Rams and the center position, it seems like.
Oh, it was every pick. If you were, it was almost comical at a point. I think I said in the 4th or 5th round, I was like, what are the odds now, or what are the bets that the Rams don't take a single offensive lineman in this draft?
Yeah.
And then they didn't, because it was just getting funny every time pass. But I guess they feel good about it. So let me ask you this. So pertaining to day 3, who of the day 3 Chargers picks, and then I'll say one for the Rams, who was your favorite day 3 pick? They had a lot of them, and they had some good ones. Who's your favorite?
It was without a doubt Brendan Hymas. They view him as a guard tackle hybrid, but I had him as a top 15 tackle in the class. And, you listen to, Brandon Thorne talk about him, or Duke Manyweather, play guys that really, really know, more offensive line stuff than I could ever forget or that I could ever learn. And they all loved him. And so he's a pro ready player. I think if he's going to play guard, he's going to have to add some functional strength, maybe add some weight to his frame. But I think, when you can get that kind of player in the 5th round, and it gives them so much flexibility, in the future, because, Brian Bulaga's contract is cuttable after this season. And if he struggles with injury, which is probably likely considering his age and who he is at this point, they can move on from Bulaga next year, and they have options. They can, if Trey Pipkins takes that step forward that they seem to be hoping for, he can be the right tackle going forward. It could be Brendan Hymas. It could be Matt Filer. They could kick him out to right tackle where he played for the Steelers. So I was just a big fan of the flexibility and the player that they gain with Brendan Hymas. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up beating Ode Abuji for the starting spot. I don't think it's going to happen, but now that they have somebody like him who can swing into any of the spots possible, it just gives them so much flexibility, which they didn't have last year. And they had this revolving door at right guard, and because Anthony Lynn kind of refused to shuffle anything else, any other spot, they didn't have that flexibility. So now if Bulaga goes down, they have options. If Ode Abuji goes down, they have options. If Lindsley goes down, they have options. And so that really was the favorite pick for me. And I really, really like the player.
No, absolutely. I when his name came off the board, I was like, that's a steal. That is a huge you get out of the Big 12 out of Nebraska. And didn't he play like 40 straight games?
Yeah, he had 40 consecutive starts, and he ended up opting out for like the last 4 games. So it could have been like 44, 45 if they had made a bowl game, which is just absurd production for an offensive lineman. And at Nebraska, like, it's not like he started 40 consecutive games at, North Dakota State or Sioux Falls or whatever. Like it was 40 consecutive starts at Nebraska.
Yeah.
And, I was just interviewing someone who covered Northwestern about Rashawn Slater. And, you run down the list of like edge rushers in the Big Ten. And in 2019, it's a ton of players who were drafted early. Obviously, you have Chase Young, you have AJ Epinesa, you have Kwity Paye from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So the edge rusher class that these offensive tackles had to go through the last couple of years is just insane. And so, obviously Chase Young. And so I'm a big fan of Hymas. Gives them that flexibility, guard, tackle, flex, and love the player.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah. I think I said Big 12. I always forget Nebraska moved to the Big 10. So, which is the Big 14. Like, when are they going to change the name?
Well, they're the Big 12 and they have 10 teams. And then the Big 10 has 14 teams. So it's like, are we ever going to change and update this thing?
I really don't understand that. Like, we can get off topic for a second. Like, the Pac-12 changed immediately. The Pac-12 added 2 teams. They immediately became from the Pac-10 to the Pac-12. Like, why are these big conferences staying? Doesn't the Big, I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
What does that say about our education system if you can't even correctly say the number of teams in your conference? It's a problem.
Well, the education system in the South is completely different. So
yeah, but the Big Ten isn't,
that's true.
Like, at least the SEC, like, they don't even put numbers on it. Like, let's just go whatever East and West or whatever they are.
Well, the Big Ten has some great academic schools like Northwestern. So you think they would be able to figure it out? You'd think.
I don't know. Maybe in 2021 we'll see an adjustment. But love the Hymas pick. I really like Chris Rumpf too for them. It's kind of a cop out taking their first day 3 pick. But I think he adds some really good pass rushing ability and could really grow into a great player, especially with a guy like Staley, who obviously knows the linebacker position very well and has coached some very good ones. So for the Rams,
I'm also just real quick. I'm also really intrigued by Nick Niemann. Very productive player at Iowa, and usually when you think of a white linebacker from Iowa, you don't think of somebody who's an elite athlete, but he tested off the charts, and so everybody kind of knows the linebacker position for the Chargers always goes through an injury or two. And so Nick Niemann's probably going to play and probably going to start a handful of games. And I hate the number choice that he chose. A linebacker wearing number 31 is ridiculous, but very intrigued by the player. And I think he's going to have a huge impact on special teams, in kind of the worst case scenario for him.
Wasn't he 51 at Iowa?
He was like 49, I think.
Okay, so why 31? I
don't know.
Touche, but I'm just going to see a running back.
I know, it's weird, but I've kind of said this, but the number change for like corners and receivers and like running backs, I get. But like when I think of a linebacker, like I think of like 52, 56, 48, not 31 or 9. Like Kenneth Murray changing to 9 is just weird to me.
See, I agree with you. I can get behind single digits and like even teens for linebackers. I don't know why I can, but 31 is it just won't look right. I think, or if like someone in the 20s, I think they'll look strange. But I can get behind like 9. Or I remember DJ Williams for Miami was number 17 way back in the day. So I can kind of get behind that. But
I'm surprised that Murray was the only one who changed numbers. I figured that there would be. I don't know if there's a deadline and if that deadline has passed already, but I was surprised that there weren't more number changes than just Murray that were kind of announced the other day.
I was too, but I guess when you have to pay out of pocket to all those jerseys to get replaced, a lot of guys are like, I'll wait a year. I can wait 1 year. Yeah. But Murray got that first round contract, so he's like, I'm good. Well, let's do this.
Yeah.
For the Rams though, all but 2 of their picks came in day 3, so they got a lot of options here. And I do like a lot of them, but my favorite has to be Bobby Brown. I don't know how much you watched him, Texas A&M. I think he can play multiple spots on the defensive line. He's got the size to play the nose if he ends up taking over for Sebastian Joseph Day or just, spelling Sebastian Joseph Day. But I think he's got the athletic ability and speed to play, a 3 tech like Michael Brockers, who obviously left him and Morgan Fox. So gives you that versatility. I think he hasn't even, reached his potential yet. I actually, I like doing these name drops every now and then, but I texted with Eric Henderson, the defensive line coach, and he was just stoked to get this guy. Says, as long as we keep his his training straight and keep his head forward. Like, we are ecstatic about the potential this guy has, the ceiling he has in this defense, playing alongside Aaron Donald. So he was, when they drafted him, I was extremely excited. And the more I looked into it, I was like, man, this pick just makes so much sense for who they lost in free agency and what he's going to be able to do right from the get-go. As I think he'll be, if not a day one starter, for sure a day one rotational player that can just add, like I said, versatility all along the defensive line. So pairing him with Aaron Donald is going to be a lot of fun. And he just has, 6'4", 320 with, great speed and athleticism. That's rare. So I think he was my favorite pick for sure.
Yeah, I think that was a sound pick for them. I didn't realize that they had 3 4th-round picks. So just kind of looking at this list, I really liked Robert Rochelle, the defensive back from Central Arkansas as well. So hard to pick, between, Brown and Rochelle as the 4th-round picks. I know I saw a little bit of frustration from Rams Twitter, over the Bobby Brown pick, but I think Robert Rochelle's,
which I was surprised.
I think Rochelle's going to be good for them because it's going to give them something different, right? Like, you're going to be able to mix things up a little bit more with him and Darius Williams than you could with him and Troy Hill, who's a very good player for them, but a little undersized, definitely a nickel kind of cornerback. So having Rochelle gives them another long, lanky athlete, which I'm excited to see how they use him. So I think Rochelle will probably be my pick for them.
Yeah, Rochelle's just a freak athlete. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list or whatever.
Yeah.
I think I talked about this last episode I did, but he, his one thing he'll improve on is he used that athleticism so much because they played, lesser competition. So if he got beat, he was able to counter and get back. Whereas in the NFL, if you get beat, you get beat. So that'll be the discipline training, but he's got the athleticism to be at the next level. So getting him in the 4th. I agree. Extremely great pick. I like Jacob Harris too out of UCF, who they can use as a tight end or a receiver. I know Chargers fans kind of know that style of play with, Donald Parham, just a real tall freak athlete that you can go up and get the football. The Rams have been needing that high point guy, especially when they brought Stafford over. That's someone that a lot of fans wanted to see the Rams add in free agency, but they get him in the draft in the 5th round. So he'll be a special teamer. And, if he gets 20 catches this year and 5 are touchdowns, I think Rams fans will be happy with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because he wasn't super productive in college, but obviously tested like a freak athlete. And so, listed at 6'6". What did he weigh in at his pro day? Because right here I'm looking at him as 210, but if he's a potential tight end guy, that's obviously not right.
Yeah, I think he was like 220, 225, but he's definitely a skinny, slender tight end for sure. He'll be a split out, slot guy probably. Not a slot receiver, but like in the slot in the red zone kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I was very curious to see where he would end up because so many people thought that he was a tight end convert, receiver only. So that's an interesting one. That's definitely the dart throw that you hope pans out into more than just a 4th-round pick. But yeah, I think their draft is solid. It looks like they really kind of favored some special teams at the end with Jake Funk and the kid from Notre Dame's Skowronek. Okay.
Skowronek, yeah. And I love Chris Garrett. Why not give the D2 kid a chance? Uber productive. 36.5 sacks over his career.
That's
great
crazy.
Athlete, 6'2", 225. Got speed on the outside. Why not give him a shot as your last pick in the draft? So let's talk running backs quick before we move on to our GM debate. I just want to hear this. Larry Roundtree, Jake Funk. Who's the better back? Who got the better one? Larry Roundtree goes to the Chargers. Jake Funk goes to the Rams. I'm not saying they're the same style running back, but I feel like they have some similarities. But who do you like better? If you watched any of them at all?
I didn't watch Funk very much because it kind of seemed like he was going to be a special teams guy. I really like Larry Roundtree. I was higher on him than our other 2 co-hosts for the Guilty as Charged podcast. I pegged him as like my sleeper pick. We went through, each position and we each picked kind of a sleeper at each spot. And Larry Roundtree was mine for the running back spot. I think for the Chargers, it's a little weird because I view him and Joshua Kelly as very similar players. So that's going to be a little interesting, maybe a little redundant there between those two. But I mean, Funk has a good spot, if he can carve out a role as a receiving back, who knows there, but as a pure runner and running back, I think Roundtree probably sees the field a little bit more. just given the Chargers' history of injuries and the Rams, having Cam Akers there and Darrell Henderson. I have a hard time envisioning a role for Funk, but I think Roundtree is going to play and definitely play a lot on special teams.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, Funk will be definitely a special team guy and could potentially be like a Malcolm Brown role where, if he gets into, I remember there were some games Brown had like 3 carries and they were all on 3rd and 1. So that could be Funk's role. But obviously the concern with him was just, two ACL tears in the same knee in 2018 and 2019. But which is never good, especially for a running back. But 7th round flyer, guy that can come in and play special teams. He does have some good get up, can run between the tackles pretty well. So a fun pick for the Rams and should add, like you said, you'll be a gunner or something on special teams. And then Roundtree, played in the SEC, Missouri alum, similar to Joshua Kelly. So, if anything, I know it's redundant, but hey, competition breeds, excellence or at least growth. So we'll see if they're both on the active roster, but at least they'll push each other, I think, because they'll basically be vying for the same type of carries in the same type of situations. So if anything, right, push each other better. So, if we're putting an over-under on, or not really an over-under, but if we're placing a bet on who is more active on offense, not just special teams, I agree with you. I think Roundtree has a better shot than, mainly because Justin Jackson's probably gonna be injured by week 6, and knock on wood. I definitely don't want that to happen, but probably gonna happen.
It's just who he is at this point, man.
Yeah. Whereas Cam Akers is the solidified starter. Darrell Henderson is your change of pace guy, and then they're fighting for scraps after that.
Well, and it's the other thing that's kind of interesting too is I know a lot of people kind of forget about him, but they have Darius Bradwell, the Chargers, that is, who spent time on the practice squad. So after Eckler and Jackson, you've got these 3 guys who are physical downhill runners for them, and so they clearly wanted to get a little more tenacity, a little more size at the running back position behind Eckler and Jackson. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one sorts out. I think. If you're looking at, somebody who could be on the, in the danger zone of being cut, I think Kelly is probably, number 1 or number 2 on that list because, I think he's a very talented runner. I still believe in his talent there, but he was awful as a special teams guy, like one of the worst players on the team. And so Larry Roundtree is going to be an upgrade in the special teams department. That much I do know. And so that could be the difference between, really being cut or not.
Yeah. That'll be something to watch. And it's always fascinating when you have players collegiately who are stars of their team, meaning they don't play special teams, and then come to the NFL and basically how they make a team is special teams. So some of that could just be learning curve. Joshua Kelly was a 30 carry guy at UCLA. He was their best player his final year at UCLA. He won games on his back, beat Stanford by himself essentially. And then come to the NFL, has some success early. Like he had some good games, game 1 and 2, and then was basically relegated to special teams that he had never really played before. So I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses, but it could be a learning curve. Maybe we see some improvement this year at special teams. I agree with you that'll have to be improved if he's going to stay on this roster. So that's always interesting to me how that dynamic of being a star at the collegiate level, and then you're just fighting for a job you've never done before in the NFL, but you were drafted for that specific reason, I guess. So, okay, let's go. Before we get to GM talk, this question came in from Kwame. I think it's an interesting one. Who do you think is smarter, Brandon Staley or Sean McVay? That's a tough debate.
That is a tough debate. I think we have to wait and see until Staley gets on the field.
Yeah.
But I think Sean McVay is one of the smartest coaches of all time. Like I really do. And there's the difference here in this conversation is there's palpable evidence. I think the record of them leading at halftime, which I think they're still undefeated, right?
Yep. Still undefeated.
I think that is like the craziest thing and really kind of points to his ability as a communicator, as someone who makes adjustments in the games. And so I think Brandon Staley is very, very smart. But I think we kind of have to wait to see until we get an on-field product for him until we can crown a winner there.
Exactly. Yeah. The answer right now is Sean McVay, going into his 5th season, 4 straight winning season, Super Bowl appearance, 3 out of 4 playoff, and Brandon Staley, who absolutely love the guy, love the hire, but got to see it on the field first. So I think that's the only answer right now. Can't say Staley until we see how they do this year, which I think he's going to do very well. So I think they'll be good. So let's talk GMs. Les Snead, I think, is I think he's fairly beloved by Rams fans. He does some very head scratching things, but it seems to kind of work for him in a way. Yeah. He's like a mad scientist in the lab. He's got he seems like that crazy guy. He gets COVID. He's in his garage doing the draft. He's got the funky glasses. Like just looks like a mad scientist. Tom Telesco, a little more buttoned up. Kind of, says the right things. More of a media kind of just like straightforward kind of guy. But he was on, I would say he was on the hot seat headed this, at least on fans' perspectives, going into his 9th year now, has had some fairly poor drafts, has had some poor free agency, some poor coaching hires. Obviously, we think he definitely got this one right. So let's just talk about this offseason. Who do you think's had the better offseason so far?
Well, it's tough because both of them, they checked off the position that needed most upgrades. They checked it off, right? Les Snead obviously needed to upgrade the quarterback spot. Did it in a great fashion with Matthew Stafford. The Chargers needed to get better on the offensive line. You get Rashawn Slater, Corey Linsley, Filer, Ibushi, and then Hymas. And so both of them have that feather in their cap of like, we checked our biggest need in a big way. The difference, though, for me is the job security standpoint, because I think Tom Telesco should have been fired. I think, what I wanted for the offseason was a clean house from everything. Like, I wanted front office gone. I wanted coaches gone. They did the coaches part, which, credit to Brandon Staley for being able to really put his own stamp on his vision. Mm-hmm. But I really thought that Tom Telesco was in danger because 2 playoff berths in 8 seasons, lots of failed draft picks, like you mentioned. But I think the Justin Herbert thing really swayed the Spanos family into keeping him, because that wasn't a no-brainer pick by any means. They could have taken Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, who are all pro left tackles or right tackles, and definitely filled that need for them too. So it wasn't like it was a no-brainer pick. And now you get Rashawn Slater and Asante Samuel Jr. Obviously, you get Kenneth Murray last year. You get this new coach who certainly seems like he's going to be a great head coach. And so Tom Telesco has job security now at this point, because I don't think the Spanos family would want to fire their GM and bring in a new GM for Brandon Staley. I think they probably want to keep these two in lock and step. And so for me, the winner is Telesco, because I think he has essentially saved his job.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I talked a lot during last season why I thought potentially Anthony Lynn would be retained was just because of pairing with Justin Herbert. Do you want to throw off that cohesion that they made? Obviously they made a decision to, but now, would you want to throw off even more cohesion by changing the GM just, in his 3rd year going in? So you gotta make some continuity at some point. And they've had a very good offseason. On paper, just on strictly paper, you have the Rams traded for Matthew Stafford, re-signed Leonard Floyd. That's it. Didn't sign
those
any
are the moves.
Yeah. They lost 3 very good starters on defense because they just couldn't afford it. So on paper, the Chargers, they rebuild their entire offensive line. They get the best center in football, do a lot of good things, I think, in free agency. And so on paper, you definitely got to say Tom Telesco. But I think the biggest thing and why I think it's hard. I don't want to sound like, because I cover both teams, but I just think it's so close. But maybe I would swing the pendulum even just a little bit too Snead, just because everyone thought it was impossible to move on from Jared Goff. No one thought it could be done. And somehow they're able to move him. They give up a lot in doing so, but they get who they think is a quarterback that will lead them to the Super Bowl. And I think you got to look at it as just this offseason, not necessarily for the future, because I agree with you that Tom Telesco now has built the Chargers ready for the future, and I think he's secured his job for at least the next 3 to 4 years. But for this offseason, the Rams did something that can make them in the Super Bowl this season, with the Chargers still maybe a few years off, and that's not anything. They couldn't really do anything else to get them further. They did great, but the Rams were able to say, hey, we added one piece that now we are that much closer from the division round to the Super Bowl. So maybe I'll swing just a smidge. But it's damn close.
Yeah,
they both been good.
I can definitely see that. Right. 100%. I think, Sports Center and that little graphic of the Chargers parallels to the Buccaneers yesterday, kind of went viral. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, yeah.
So there's a lot of hype about the Chargers, right? And I definitely understand it, and I am excited about them as well. But traditionally speaking, you just don't see that kind of leap from a year one coaching staff and like all this turnover. And I think, they nailed the hire, and I think it's going to be a great coaching staff moving forward. But it traditionally has taken time for a coaching staff to really put its fingerprints and really get their way of football into a team. And so the Chargers could definitely make the playoffs next year. But I think that's probably the ceiling is a playoff berth, maybe a wild card win if they're healthy and if they're lucky. But the Rams, like, we've seen them win playoff games quite a bit under Sean McVay. We've seen them contend for a Super Bowl. And I said this to, when we did our little roundtable with Gilbert Manzano and Fernando, I think Stafford is going to be an MVP candidate under them. I really do. I think they've got great weapons. They obviously added that to that with Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell, really solid offensive line. And we were just talking about how smart Sean McVay is as one of the best play callers in the league. And you give him Matthew Stafford, who I've always felt like is one of the 5 or 6 most talented quarterbacks in the league, and just was in a terrible situation in Detroit. So I think, like the upgrade from Jared Goff to Matt Stafford isn't as big as going from like Dan Feeney to Corey Linsley, but it might be big enough where you're going from like Forrest Lamp to Matt Filer, and it's at the most important position. So if the Rams are Super Bowl contenders again this year, I think that's a likely scenario. And if they win the Super Bowl, then obviously the answer to this question is less need.
Yeah. I'm still holding out hope we have an all LA Super Bowl somehow. Chargers at SoFi.
That would be epic, man. That would be epic.
That'd be amazing. But yeah, to your point, before we move on to the schedule a little bit, but this I think is a slam dunk hire. I think Brandon Staley is going to be such a good coach. The staff he's put together, I absolutely love. The future is so bright for this Chargers team.
100%.
But yeah, the expectations just need to be, it can't be if they don't make the playoffs, all of a sudden, fire everyone, horrible hire last season. And this is a weird comparison because I think, in my opinion, Brandon Staley is a much better coaching candidate. But you look at the Carolina Panthers, went 5-11 in 2018. Ron Rivera left. They got a whole new staff. They brought in Matt Rule. Everyone was excited by the hire. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater, all this stuff. They go 5-11 in his first year because it takes time to rebuild that culture, implement your own schemes, your own systems, do all this. You're changing everything. And so I do think the Chargers will be improved, but they did finish 7-9. So them going 8-8 or 9-7 is improvement and doesn't get in the playoffs. Right. We'll see. I personally think they will make the playoffs. That's just me. Maybe I'm 2 glass half full, but fans need to say, okay, as long as we see the future improvement, maybe we don't have the success yet this season because it is going to take time. And especially on the offensive line, it takes at least a year to build that continuity.
Yeah. So the offensive line, I think it's reasonable to expect them to be a top 15 to 18 unit. And that's a huge upgrade, right? But, it does take time. And I think it's not something that not really gets a lot of attention. And really the biggest thing for me, aside from the health, the roster, the coaching staff for the Chargers this year, that schedule is very, very difficult this year. You get the AFC North, you get the NFC East, and that's kind of the window, right? And so I know a lot of people are going to say it's the NFC East. They're not very good. Well, it's Washington's really good. Yeah. Dallas is very, very talented, and that's going to be essentially a Cowboys home game if we're being completely honest. So the schedule is significantly more difficult this year than it was last year. And, last year you're 7-9, but you get a free win against the Chiefs at the end. The Falcons weren't very good, and you play the Bengals, who were not very good, and that was the season opener. So the schedule is significantly more difficult this year for the Chargers than it was last year, and I think that absolutely plays into them winning or losing more games. And so I think they absolutely have the talent, the top tier talent, to make the playoffs. If everybody stays healthy, if Derwin James and Joey Bosa stay healthy for the entire season, then absolutely yes, they can make the playoffs. But I'm just not thinking it's likely to happen. I think it's possible, but not likely.
Yeah. They have a tough row, and the Rams have some very tough opponents too. But as I just showed there on the screen, as Ross put, they get some good games, some easy games there with the Jags, and
and possibly Aaron Rodgers less Packers. That's a good point.
Yeah, I know. That's so crazy, that whole situation. We'll see. But I don't think he's playing there anymore, whether he's traded or not. He may be, just sitting at home. But that's a good segue into the schedule, though. So schedule comes out on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who will have the first game, home game, Chargers or Rams. Let's say,
do they have like an agreement with the league that like Rams get the first dibs, or will they kind of mix it up?
Well, didn't the Chargers end up having the first home game last year because the Rams were supposed to have the first preseason game, but then there was no preseason?
No, the Rams opened up.
The Rams did open up. Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a long year.
I think it was to the point where like the first preseason game was canceled, and then like they just kind of canceled it outright. And so I can't remember how that whole thing worked out.
Maybe it was okay. It must have been the Chargers had the first preseason game in the Rams.
Yeah.
This actual game.
That must have been it.
So I would think that they would have planned on then the Chargers getting this year, but something tells me just because there was no fans, they'll give Kroenke and the Rams the first home game. I just feel like that, first time fans being in the stands.
Yeah,
I think it'll probably be the Rams, but let's say it is the Chargers or just the Chargers' first home game, whether it's first or the second week. Who do you want to see as the opponent that they open SoFi at in 2021?
Let me pull up this list first.
You got. Obviously, you can't do the Cowboys. Let me just say that. You cannot do the Cowboys because, like you said, it'll be a Cowboys home game. That's nothing against the Chargers. If it was the Rams, if it was many other teams, Cowboys travel well, and there's a ton of Cowboys fans just here in LA already. As you said, your dad's in Utah. Your dad was a Cowboys fan. So,
well, I think as long as it's not a divisional opponent, I'll be happy. Like, I think there's been it's been the Chiefs or the Raiders and the Broncos opening the schedule like every year for like the last 7 years.
Yeah.
I personally would love to see them open with the Browns, man. Like, as weird as that is, I think the two teams are very similar. It'll be a great game. And you get all this, top tier talent on the field. You get Odell versus Keenan Allen, John Johnson and Derwin James. And like, I think that would be a fantastic opener. Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa. Like, it's weird to look at the Browns and be like, damn, they got a great roster, but
dude, they're so good.
They're so good on paper. So I think Chargers Browns would be a fantastic opener, hopefully on prime time. I think the Browns would be my choice.
Yeah, I think both teams, this is maybe just LA bias, but I think both teams home opener will be a primetime game.
It should be that way. It should be that way.
Yeah, I think both teams. So if it's week 1 Rams, I think they'll be the primetime game. Then week 2 Chargers, I think they'll be a primetime game. The Browns, dude, the Browns are so good. Like that team, if everything comes together and Baker plays top 15 level quarterback play, that's a dangerous team.
They might be the second best team. They might even have the best roster in the AFC. Like, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Yeah.
Because the Chiefs defense outside of Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu is not all that great.
Exactly.
The Browns defense is like talent wise is crazy. You got Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney. Like, I know Clowney's been kind of down, but like talent wise, no one's gonna deny that.
Yeah. Then you've got the number 1 guy. He's like the third pass rushing option, which is perfect.
Yeah. And like their sub package defense is gonna be crazy because you've got Denzel Ward, Troy Hill, and you could go Greg Newsome, or you could go with Greedy Williams. Yeah. Safety wise, you've got John Johnson, and then you've got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Like, that sub package defense is crazy, man.
Disgusting. They added another big free agent too that I'm just like blanking on because they added so much talent. But I think that'd be a great one. If it's not a division game, I think Browns Chargers would be a solid one. And then I think you're not risking either having too many away fans that will travel. But I think it's going to be. This is what I don't want people to do, and I know Chargers fans won't do this, but the national media and salty Charger fans will. This is the first year SoFi can have fans. There's going to be there's going to be a lot of overlap. Yeah. There's going to be a shit ton of away fans that are going to travel out here to come see this Mecca in LA. It's going to happen. So everyone needs to settle down, not overreact. Like, look, they have this new stadium. They still can't attract fans. It's BS. They've almost sold out all their season tickets. It's just first time having fans. People are going to come here. It's LA. Yeah. They want to see this.
And
place.
Like, look at this schedule of home opponents that they have. Yeah. Obviously, you've got the Cowboys. You've got the Raiders and Broncos and Chiefs, who all three fan bases travel really well.
Yep.
And you got the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Giants, the Patriots, the Vikings. Like really the only home game that's going to be a true home game for them is the Browns. Like if we're being completely honest. So
yeah,
I think people have just kind of underestimated the fact that this is a long process. Like they left a place that they were in for 60 years. Like it's not like the Rams who were in Los Angeles previously for a long time. They weren't in St. Louis for, I think they were in St. Louis for like what, 20 years?
20 years, yeah.
The Chargers have been in San Diego for 50. Yeah. And so I think people kind of underestimated really how much of a process this is. Definitely trending in the right direction. Like you said, they sold out all their season tickets, but this home slate, like if you're a Chargers fan and you want all this nonsense to stop of like they don't have fans, you better get your butt to the stadium. If I lived in Los Angeles, I'd be going to every single game and having season tickets, but I don't. So I'll probably go another 2 or 3. So
it's only a 4-hour drive.
it's a 4-hour drive, and then you got to park and then you got to pay for tickets, and
you come stay with me in Pasadena. We Uber down, or you don't drink, so you can drive. And even with the Rams, man, I mean, there's still a way. It's LA. It's just a fact. It's LA. People are going to come here from out of town. When it's 5 degrees in Minnesota in November, they want to come to 65 degrees in LA, especially now that we have this beautiful new stadium. So, but looking at the Rams schedule, and we'll wrap this up. There's 2 games for me that I want to see the Rams open with. 2 options. One is a riskier option. You do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Super Bowl champions. Brady here, primetime game. Rams beat him last year in primetime in Tampa. So now they get him again, but in LA. You have all the glamour of the Super Bowl. You have the Rams aspiring to be the Super Bowl. If they can knock off the Bucs, week 1 or whenever they do play them, that just, I think, looks so good for this Rams team, this Rams organization for Los Angeles. So that's one risky play, because obviously the Bucs did not lose a single starter. Everyone's back from the Super Bowl winning team. The other one I like is Detroit, which does not seem like at all would be a sexy play, but you have Jared Goff versus Matt Stafford. I mean, the story writes itself. You have Brad Holmes, who is with the Lions now as well. So there's so many parallels between both these teams. It's probably a very, very winnable game for the Rams. It's the NFL. Any given Sunday, anyone can beat anyone, but the Rams are a much better team. So you can start the season off with high morale, beating the team. You get Goff back in SoFi. It'll be that interesting. I don't think fans hated him. It's like he left on his own volition. So I think he gets some cheers for what he did here. And then Stafford playing his former team, playing there, whatever, 12, 13 years he's been there. So either one I'd like. Lions is a safer play and you have fun storylines. Bucs are the Super Bowl champs. You always want to beat the best. So I like either.
Hey, but then you've got some Rams versus Jets vibes too there that potentially lose to a team that they should have no business losing to.
That's true. And then then you start the season off horribly, and you're like, great, we just lost to the quarterback we gave away, and he put up 350 and 3 touchdowns.
I think also like sneaky play here is the Jaguars, because I think the NFL would love to get the debut of Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence on primetime in SoFi. Like I think that could be a sneaky play for them. Yeah,
it could be. It's not one you would think about at all. The Jaguars are the Jaguars. They've always been.
Yeah.
But
that's a big draw, right? You get the eyeballs of all the Ohio State and Clemson people. Like that would do really well in the ratings, I would think. Rams, Monday Night Football against Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer. I think that would do really well.
Yeah, really, any of their non-conference opponents or non-division opponents. The Titans is not going to be it. Just it's not. They're kind of I mean, who knows what their offense is going to look like now that Arthur Smith is gone? But they're not the sexy fun. They're just a run first team, but could be. And then, but then you have the Bears, who they've played. What, this is their 4th year in a row playing the freaking Bears? But still starting. Is it Andy Dalton? Like it's round 4 of the.
Justin Fields better start, man. They have to start Fields.
Yeah, right. You'd think, but they're in a weird spot with Nagy and Ryan Pace, because this pick was like a all-in pick for their jobs, but it could also be like, well, he's young enough that we could move up, like the Chargers did. We could move on and start fresh with a whole new staff. With Justin Fields moving forward. So
the Rams, their official crossover is AFC South and NFC North. Then
yes, correct. Yeah, AFC South and NFC North, and they get their 17th game opponent, I think, is the Giants.
Looks like it's
the Giants is
Giants.
I believe is their random 17th game. Where the Chargers is the Vikings, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
So that's That's interesting. If they go with the Buccaneers, though, that would probably mean that they would get week 2 home opener then.
True. Yeah. The Bucs will open at home being Super Bowl champs. That's a good point. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm going.
How many primetime games do you think the Rams get?
Oh, man.
How many did they have last year?
They had like 4, I think, if I remember right. But I think
the Chargers
didn't they get 1 or 2, or did they not get any? The Chargers.
The Chargers had the Monday night game in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then they had Thursday night against the Raiders.
That's
right. They had 2.
And both away, though, which is weird. But
yeah.
I think between the two teams, or was it against the Raiders at SoFi, or was it at Vegas?
No, it was Raiders in Las Vegas Thursday night. I'm pretty sure those were the only 2.
I'm trying to think out the top of my head, but I think so. I think you're right. Both Bronco games were Sunday games. I think between the 2 teams, you will see 7 or 8 primetime games. That's high, but I think we'll see it between the 2.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think the Chargers will get 4. I think the Rams will get 4. I think that sounds right. Especially with the schedule, like you said, like Rams and Buccaneers.
It will be primetime, no matter.
That's destined to be a primetime game, no matter what. Yeah. They'll get a primetime game against the Niners or the Seahawks, probably both. The Giants are always on primetime TV, so that's another one.
Yeah.
And then Chargers, I think Chargers will get a Chiefs one probably on primetime, Herbert versus Mahomes. I would love to see them put their game against the Bengals on primetime. You got Herbert against Burrow.
That's very likely, actually, yeah.
Like I said, the Browns game would be a lot of fun. And then Cowboys they'll have an NFC East game that's on primetime 100% because everybody knows how much the NFC East gets played on primetime.
Yeah. It's always the worst games every year.
I'm so sick of watching Giants and Cowboys week 17 primetime. Like that Eagles game this year was just
garbage.
So. I know that the Cowboys being on primetime makes sense, obviously based in the league, but it's in the Eagles and the Washington primetime as much as they.
Yeah, I know. Can't do it anymore. So, all right. Well, I think that'll wrap up. We've hit the hour mark here on LAFB Live. It's been fun, always, my man. Got some good day 3 picks. Got a little GM talk. We got some schedule talk in there. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you. What's on the docket for the rest of the weekend for you?
Well, I've got a defensive depth safety room. And then Thursday, so we'll in-laws and my father-in-law is Traeger.
I'm kind of losing you a little bit. I think our Wi-Fi is a spotty, but I heard Traeger in there, so it sounds like you may be doing some smoking. So that sounds great. If you can hear me, I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, your screen's a little fuzzy, but we'll get you back. But anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in to LAFB Live. We are on the LA Football Network. Ryan Dyrud, joined as always by the great Stephen Haglund. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. We got a good listenership this Saturday morning, so we'll be back again every Saturday through the off season is the plan. I think we're gonna make it happen. So, but Stephen, if you're not frozen, appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, I got something there. So, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk throughout the week on Twitter. Make sure to check out the LA Football Podcast. We'll be up later today. Plus, got some great interviews. Ooh, Steve, I'm going to tell you when we get off here who we got lined up next week. I know you'll be stoked, but I always tease it. We got a great interview next week. 2 great interviews for you on the LA Football Podcast. Make sure also to check out Steven's podcast, Guilty as Charged. Him, Alex, and Tyler do a phenomenal job getting all things Chargers for you. And obviously make sure to check out LA Football Network, LAFBnetwork.com for all of your print and digital content. Plus, we added new podcasts to there as well. We got Chargers Unleashed. We got Rams Brothers. We got Compas on the Beats. We got some great stuff brewing at LAFB. Appreciate you all. Steven, my man. We'll talk soon.